The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents Biblical Parables. Why? So, I recently did a video, which should be posted already, on metaphor. And we looked at it from the standpoint of Star Trek and other things. And the whole reason for doing that video, to talk about the fact that metaphors, by definition, are inefficient and inaccurate ways to communicate ideas. If your goal is clarity in communication, metaphor is not what you should be doing. As a matter of fact, binary and the strictures of various computer programming languages are going to be far more close to a digitally accurate clarity of, here's my meaning, I want to give it to you. Now, I'm not remotely saying that metaphor and parables aren't useful. They absolutely are. It's just that they're not clear in what they're communicating. And when it comes to the Bible, there's loads and loads of parables and metaphors and sayings, and people love this. And I think it's in part because they get to see what they want to see. And maybe, just maybe, there's another way to look at the parables that you've been reading in your Bible. So let's see what's there. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. What does it mean to say that the Lord is my shepherd? Well, when I was a Christian, much like the way I understood a rolling stone gathers no moss to be a keep moving suggestion, when I looked at the verse, the Lord is my shepherd, I thought, that's because the shepherd loves the flock and tends to the flock and keeps the flock from danger. This is what this means. And I'm not going to claim that it is intended to mean anything else. What I am going to do is point out that when I look at the passage now, I also have to recognize that there's a reason that a shepherd looks after the flock, so that he can shear them, so that he can kill them and cook them. The shepherd isn't someone who just loves sheep. The shepherd is tending to what the shepherd owns. There are people, I'm sure, who just love sheep. And maybe some of them keep sheep. Hey, we've got a ranch. We're never going to, we're not going to shear them. Well, we're going to shear them because, that's good for their health or whatever else. As if nature, evolutionary process set up this so that sheep need to be sheared. I don't know. There may be a symbiotic relationship between domesticated sheep and what we do to them. But generally speaking, the sheep are the property of the shepherd. And the reason to looking after them is because that sheep has value to you for food, for clothing, for trade, etc. That's what it means to be, I am the sheep, you are the shepherd. And as if that weren't clear, don't get me wrong, I'm still fine with the notion that, hey, the Lord is my shepherd, that's him trying to keep me from harm, except that if that were the only parable in the Bible, I think you could go either way. If it were the only parable, hey, the Lord is my shepherd, you'd be fine with that. But it doesn't just say that, and there are other parables. What if for those other parables put together have a consistent message that isn't just, man, look how much this shepherd loves me, but hey, why does the shepherd love me? You are the potter, I am the clay, is another proverbial metaphor of reaching out to God, saying that I am the clay and you are the potter. Well, the potter doesn't love the clay. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a potter. I know that there are people who do pottery. As a matter of fact, I have a friend who does pottery. I'm sure that he loves to do pottery. I'm not sure that he loves the clay. I'm not sure that he's a caretaker of the clay. He's the one who decides what the clay will be. Here's a lump of mud that I'm going to form into something. Now that can be beautiful. I've seen amazing pottery. But to talk about a human being as if they are something for you to mold into what you want, that's manipulation. That's indoctrination. That is psychological torment. It would be like saying, you're my child, and when you grow up, you're going to be exactly what I want you to be, and I'm going to force feed you this, and I'm going to make sure that you do this, and you're going to be required to do that. There's nothing about individual freedom or autonomy there, and there's nothing that shows that the potter cares for the clay for anything more than its usefulness to them. It's not like potters run around the world going, there's some mud over there. I love that mud. Don't get me wrong. It may be useful for their purposes, but it's not like they're genuinely trying to save mud from being something else. In 1 Corinthians 13:1, it says, if I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but I do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And it seems to me at first blush that the purpose of this proverb is to basically, along with everything else in 1 Corinthians, talk about the value and need of love. That if you do this, you may think you're doing good, but if you don't have love, it's nothing. The problem is, it's not true. This is simply not true. First of all, a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal are useful. They're useful for alarms. They're useful to wake up to. They're useful for countless things. But if I say, if I give a sandwich to the homeless but have not love, it is useless. No, that's not true. If I gave a sandwich to someone who was in need, I have helped someone in need. My motivations, I would love to have the best motivations. I would love for most people to have the best motivations. But my motivations don't really have any bearing on whether or not that person's life is better now that we've helped feed them or helped support them. And by the way, what do you mean by love? Well, that's where Corinthians goes into detail defining, love is patient and kind and blah, blah, blah. But this isn't a video about what the Bible means by love in one passage versus what it means by love in another passage. That's a video for another day. Not to be confused, there are also idioms and quirks of languages that just aren't known within the Bible. It's easier for a rich man to get into heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. You may have heard that the eye of the needle is a door in the side of the city walls that a fully packed camel couldn't get through. You may have heard that camel is a mistranslation of the word knot, or word for knot, and that they're talking about trying to pull a knot through an eye of a needle. What the original meaning of this is not clear, as far as I can tell. And so, at a minimum, it would have been much better to just say what you mean. I am the vine, you are the branches. Okay, congratulations. So I think I'm going to go and do some Bible reading for you. Matthew chapter 13. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered and around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. And then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell only in a rocky place where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. And in verse 10, the disciples come to Jesus. This was Jesus speaking, supposedly. The disciples come to him and ask, why do you speak to the people in parables? And here's Jesus' answer, supposedly. He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, meaning his disciples, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they will have will be taken from them. And this is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing they do not see, though hearing they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, that you will be ever hearing but never understanding. You will be ever seeing but not perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, the disciples, because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but didn't see it. There's more, and there's other examples, but essentially Jesus is saying, I'm speaking to them in parables because I don't want some of them to understand. I only want the people who can think abstractly and intuit the right answer to understand. This parable, which is recorded in the Bible, whose meaning I think is fairly straightforward, and I'm confused as to why the people who heard it and even the disciples would be like, why are you speaking to them in parables? It's facts about sowing seeds and a metaphor for whether or not your foundation, the soil, the footing, the place that what you're putting your trust in is good enough for you to succeed and grow, or whether you will wither and die on the vine. I don't know how many people were confused by Jesus' parable, but Jesus seemed to flatly say that that was his point, was to confuse them with a parable. Now, here's the real problem. If Jesus is God, and he's intentionally speaking in ways that are intended to confuse and deceive, if he is speaking intentionally in ways where he is not attempting to clearly communicate an idea, but is instead engaged in vagaries in order to intentionally mislead the people that he doesn't want to get it, and to only deliver his secret message to those who do, why not just tell them? Why do you need to publish a book? Why do you need to give a sermon that you know is going to be published into a book that is going to confuse more people? If in fact the God of the Bible is real, then the God of the Bible is a lying ass who intentionally steps forward and says, behold, I'm going to tell you something important that your salvation and your future may depend on, and then intentionally speaks in a way that is prone to interpretation, misinterpretation, and confusion, because he says that he doesn't care to have everybody understand. I have come not to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, etc., or I've only come to these. If you want to speak clearly, you don't do it in metaphor. If you want to speak impressively, if you want to manipulate people and make them think you're the smart one because you figured out the secret message behind what I'm saying, then you speak in metaphor, then you speak in parables. That's what you do. And so you've built an entire religion on the notion that there are some people who are so special, they get and understand this secret meaning, or that for a very simple parable that almost anyone could understand, if you get it, you are one of the elect. You are one of the chosen. If you understand the parable of the sower, which, by the way, you probably understand it because you heard it and it's kind of obvious, and because preachers have been preaching sermons about it, why on earth would any preacher tell you the secret hidden meaning of the parable of the sowers if Jesus' intent was for you to not understand it unless you could? If Jesus wanted you to understand it, Jesus could have explained it to you. And so if there are preachers running around explaining biblical parables while also recognizing that Jesus was intentionally using biblical parables because he didn't want everybody to know the message, well, now they're in conflict because they're instructed by the Great Commission to go ye therefore into all the world preaching the gospel, but at no point are they instructed to explain the parables. What they should be doing is handing the book to people, explaining why they believe what they believe, and saying, here's what Jesus said, now it's up to you to figure it out. Otherwise, why did Jesus waste his time hiding his meaning in a parable just so you could come along and no spoiler alert, no nothing, just here's what Jesus means. Now that you know, you're part of our secret smart club of people who understand abstract metaphor. Congratulations. Parables are useless for conveying accurate information. Jesus, if he existed, knew this and intentionally said that's why he's using them. Metaphor, beautiful. Parable, beautiful. Fables, beautiful. Idioms are interesting. None of them are good ways to communicate clear direction. There's some hypocrisy in preachers running around explaining Jesus' parables. If I was God and I intentionally spoke to people in a way that only some of them could understand, and I told people that I was doing this, and then they said, hey, what he really means is this, I think I'd smite them. And maybe the fact that all these preachers running around explaining parables haven't been smited at all is yet another argument against the existence of the very God that they believe in. Maybe not a strong argument, because maybe he gave them secret instructions to also explain those parables, and that if they can convince someone that the parables correct understanding, then they get an extra prize in heaven, maybe an extra seal, maybe an extra room in their mansion, an extra gilded floor, an extra precious stone in their crown. Man, it's time we do a video on what the hell people think's going on with heaven. Probably do that next time. See you later. Bye-bye.
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.